Hello and welcome to the Final Whistle podcast. My name's Harry McBain and today I'm joined by Adam and Des, both Forest fans. Go and check out their social medias, which I'll leave linked to the episode below. As you can imagine, we're all Forest fans. We're here for one reason, to talk about the brilliant start to the season. Worst start in 108 years for Forest. Firstly, thanks for joining us, guys. Des, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts from the start of this season?
Just a little bit taken aback, really. I didn't think we was going to storm the league by any stretch of the imagination. I never expected us to do particularly well, but I didn't expect us to be as bad as we've been. And of course, as each defeat sort of mounts up, it's looking pretty ominous going into the winter. So yeah, a little bit taken aback by how poor it's been so far.
Yeah, Adam, how have you found the start to the season so far? Because obviously, I don't think anyone expected us, as Des said, to be in this situation.
No, I mean, it's a tough one, really. I mean, I think we went into the season. I think most people realistically looking at it, thinking, a top half finish and just progress on that last season would be acceptable. But I think, 6, 7 games in, bottom of the league with 1 point, and that 1 point coming against, a very poor Derby side, albeit they've started well. It's disappointing. I think that's the only word to describe it, really.
Yeah, and we've got Middlesbrough tomorrow night. This is being filmed on Tuesday, which is being seen as a must-win game for us to really. Otherwise, I think we're 7 points adrift, basically, depending on how results go tonight. It's Neil Warnock. We never do too well against him. Des, what are your hopes for the game? Obviously, we want to win, but what are your realistic thoughts on it?
I suppose it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because the Championship is tricky at the end of the day. Whenever teams come to Forest in the past and they're bottom of the league and they've not won in 6 games, they come and turn us over. So there's always, I find with the Middlesbrough side, there's always a chance. They seem a little bit brittle. They're not as good as they were a couple of years ago. What is interesting is the fact we played Cardiff on Sunday, and that was Neil Warnock's team. That's the team he built over a period of time, sort of the big guys at the back, the big guys at the front. And I guess that's what he's looking to do at Middlesbrough. And I know with a couple of players, he'll be trying to sort of probably use the same sort of tactics to bully us a little bit in both penalty areas. So I'm expecting a tough game. I'm not sure it'll be high scoring, nothing more than 2-1. Hopefully, something just falls our way. We grab the win. I'm not expecting it. I really can't see it, but it's the Championship. You never know what you're going to get. What I do expect more than most things is this game is going to be pretty much like the last one. It's going to be a bit of an aerial sort of bombardment, and we're going to have to stand up to the test. What I found from Sunday is it didn't change the tactics when Cardiff started putting the pressure on. We got in front for once, for the first time in a long time, and that's when we had to go for it, which Chris Hughton doesn't do, or he had to find some sort of awareness of what to do at the back and deal with that threat. When they put Kiefer Moore on, they just pulled us all over the pitch. God forbid I say this, but perhaps even another centre half in there, just to do something that little bit different. But yeah, I don't. I quite often predict Forest scores, and I quite often go, whoever scores the first goal is going to win, and I pretty much think it might just be one of those.
Yeah, and Adam, we've seen Chris Hughton mainly use a 4-2-3-1. It was a 4-4-2 at the weekend with the two strikers, really. What do you expect really to see it against Middlesbrough? Do you think Hughton will change it up at all?
I think for a lot of fans, when we, an hour before the kickoff, and we looked at the team and thought, what, he's tried something different. He's been very rigid with that 4-2-3-1. Doesn't look like it was ever going to change. And then he decided, I'll go for something a bit different. And I think, to be honest, first half against Cardiff, I think even the biggest, Hughton out supporters must admit that we played all right. We were definitely solid. I think, obviously Max Lowe at left back was exactly what we've been after. It's just that that overlapping fullback that could get into those areas. And I think under Sabri, when Yuri did that, it was it always came to a good effect, and I think that really helped us. But second half, obviously as Des said there, I think when Moore and Colwell came on, it changed the game, and we didn't have anything to combat that ultimately. I think Kiefer Moore is one of the best strikers in the Championship, without a shadow of a doubt for me. And even his presence just it scared the defence. But going into Middlesbrough, I mean, personally, if we're all saying what we personally do, I'd go for a 3-back. I'd prefer to see maybe the new lad come in, Eli, or if Mbeso's fit, and go with a 3-back and 2 wing-backs. Obviously, Jed Spence can't play against his parent club, I believe, so it's going to be, a tough one at right back. I know the lad from Olympiacos, I don't think can play anyway because of the quarantine rules. So it'd be interesting to see if Osei Tutu maybe fit. I know he's nearing fitness. I'm not sure if he is. If not, it might be Finn back. But I think ultimately I think if you go with that, it's a system that could work for us. We have the personnel to play it, but I'd be lying if I said that I think going into the Middlesbrough game that anything will drastically change. I think it'll be more that 4-2-3-1 or the 4-4-2 that played against Cardiff, but we just need to adapt to the game not going our way. And against Cardiff, we lost because we couldn't do that ultimately.
Yeah, and I think one of the surprising things for me was we saw the 2 strikers up there. First half, they did quite well. And then the second half, obviously, the referee didn't give us a few fouls maybe on Lyle Taylor that we should have had. But what are your thoughts, Des, on Lyle? Because he's one that a lot of fans seem to like, mainly because of what he did at Charlton, and then didn't really get a chance last year as much as people have wanted. But some people say, he dives about too much instead of actually going for the ball. What are your thoughts on him?
Well, to be honest, I was a massive fan of Lyle Taylor when we signed him. I saw the 2 games at Charlton when he scored against us. I went to the away game and I saw the game obviously at home when he didn't do very much during the game. He's not that type of player to keep the play flowing, link up. You can see at the moment the ball's bouncing back off him every time it goes up, or he's conceding a free kick because he's backing in. What I've said in other places about Taylor is we need to get him facing goal. So we need to turn him around. We need to be creating the chances from the wing, because I don't think there's a much better finisher in the Championship than Lyle Taylor. You saw the goal against Coventry where Brennan Johnson actually got in behind, put the ball across, and he's there. He's worked the position and scored the goal. And I always remember, I don't know if you guys can remember, you're a bit younger than me, but back to Marcus Tudgay, he was exactly the same. Forest were really poor under Steve Cotterill. And Tudgay had to play that same role with the ball coming in, trying to hold it up, trying to bring players in who are not necessarily attack-minded. I'm thinking of Yates and all these kind of players around him who the midfield need to link up with. And when Billy Davies come in and they put Tudgay facing the other way, he was a really, really good player. So I don't think, like in terms of Taylor and Forest and the future, if they play to his strengths, I think there's something there. I just don't think with Lyle Taylor that we're playing to his game. He's for all his endeavour, and I noticed he worked really hard, particularly in the first half on Sunday, and in a few games so far this season. He's working hard. He's doing the right thing. He kind of applies himself well, but he's just not getting in the right positions. You'd hope with someone like a Grabban or more attacking players that we can perhaps get him that 10 yards further up the pitch, because that's where he needs to be. We need him sort of in the penalty area, not on the halfway line. I noticed when we played Derby and Joe Worrell came back in, rather than play passes sideways, Worrell was trying to find Lyle Taylor's feet every time, obviously conscious of the fans and getting booed for playing it sideways. And it was just coming back. And I think this thing about the free kicks, I think he kind of upsets referees from the start in the way he does go about his business. And some of them are genuine free kicks, but he doesn't win them. I think someone like a Jack Grealish, who's famous for winning free kicks and the number. And the problem is we've got with Taylor is he's not winning those free kicks. And the ball's bouncing back off him and he's not in the right areas. That I don't think that's all his fault, but until we play a system that allows him to sort of face goal, get chances and take them, he's going to struggle.
Yeah, and talk about the system there. We'll probably go to the main bit of the conversation around one man, Chris Hughton. We saw Sabry's departure, and in typical Marinakis ownership style, we had Hughton not very long after announced as manager. Adam, are you in or out on Hughton? And obviously after a poor start, how much longer do you really think we're going to give him?
It's tough, isn't it? I mean, a lot of us were probably, when Sabri left, probably under the agreement that it was the right decision at the time, potentially. But at the same time, we had such a, the season before, we had such highs. I mean, I went to probably nearly every away game as well as having my season ticket. And it's just some of the best days and matches I've seen as a Forest fan. And, for him to leave the club was tough, but it was probably the right call. And I think with Hughton, he's come in, and I think, we've all wanted him to play. Well, the thing is, I mean, he's not notorious for playing an excellent football. I mean, Brighton, Newcastle fans, certainly Norwich, I mean, they're very harsh with their criticism of him. So it's, we knew that him coming in, he might just be a safe pair of hands. He might come in and steady the ship. And obviously, the first game he came in, we beat Blackburn away. And I thought, you know what, it's that sort of performance where we didn't play well, but we got 3 points that I thought Hughton would implement into the side. And, we're probably, 50 games into his tenure here. And I would love him to turn it around. I just can't see that he will, and I can't see where that's going to come from. I mean, we have signed a couple of players, obviously, albeit some of them can't play yet. But realistically speaking, I don't know how much of a difference they're going to make to this side at the moment under Hughton and how he plays. So for me, it's with a reluctance, because I never like to say I never like to say managers out. I never want to tweet about managers saying I want you out, or like a lot of people have been really abusive to him and stuff online. I mean, it's not nice, but for me, it's not going to work for him at Forest. And I think we do need to get somebody else in. And I think that the international break was the perfect time to do it, albeit that point at Derby, I think it would have happened. And I was stunned on Monday morning this week when I woke up and there wasn't an announcement. It was surprising. But I think the Middlesbrough game, if we lose, I really can't see how he can stay at the club. And that's not me wanting him to go. It's just, I think it's not worked. And I think he'd probably admit that. Maybe not now, but when he leaves the club, he'd probably admit that.
Yeah, and I think it was one of those ones that when he came in, a lot of the fan base were like, oh, we finally appointed someone that's got experience that probably will do quite well with us. But looking at the stats, I've got them down here. So his win rate is 26%. It's the second lowest in the last number of managers since McLeish, who's got 14%. So he's doing all right compared to him. But then you look back to people like Martin O'Neill, 42% win rate, and he was being shoved out the door. Aitor Karanka is probably the last manager that people maybe preferred seeing. Obviously, Lamucci did well, but we got rid of Karanka at 7th. Des, what are your thoughts on Hughton? And do you think that it's entirely his fault, obviously, with the whole Vrentsos situation and the way that the club's been handled over the last few years?
To be honest, I never wanted Chris Hughton to be Forest manager, purely because I saw why people would. I saw the stats, I saw his promotions, his CV stood up to most other candidates, but it was too similar to what we'd had under Lamucci. It was a defensive-minded coach. Yes, Lamucci fell to pieces at the end. The team fell to pieces, but he wasn't going to bring that team up to another level. Again, God forbid I keep harping back to Billy Davies, but when he come in, that sort of spark and that he pulls everyone together and makes it feel like they're all in the trenches together. And you wasn't going to get that kind of character, and particularly with the situation as it was around him, COVID and everything going off and the lack of fans, it must have been hard coming into that environment. But I don't think it's all his fault. I really don't. The fullbacks at the start of the season were poor, and whether they're kids, whether it was Bong or whoever, it wasn't all their fault either. But already it got weak links in the team, and then the signings, players that had come in under Lamucci that wasn't his fault, that have not been about the team, that he might have liked to get a bit more out of. So I don't see it's all his fault. There's lots going on at the club to suggest it's not his fault. You know, we hear different rumours every day, you know, if we read Twitter and things like that. So I do feel for the guy. I really feel for him. He wasn't my choice. Do I want a new manager now? Yes, because at the end of the day, a manager has to work. And I think Hughton's been honest enough to say this himself. A manager has to work with what he's got. You know, that ultimately this is football in the modern era. You know, we all want them to pick the players and pick their own players and sign the players, but it doesn't happen like that anymore. And there always is a little bit of interference from the top. But I definitely do feel for him, because I think he's had his fingers burnt a little bit with the job. You know, he's probably been given these assurances that he can do the job and we can get rid of these players and he can get these players in. But ultimately, you know, I think issues that happen, I think of the fullbacks in particular, issues that happen with Ribeiro and Jenkinson before he was there, you know, those players would have been crucial at the start of the season. You know, the Coventry game I think of, you know, we might have held on, you know, with Ribeiro and a more experience. Because all I seem to think with this championship is you need a streetwise manager and you need streetwise players. And we thought we'd got a streetwise manager in Chris Hughton, you know, because the managers tend to go around the clubs and the players will give someone away on a free and he's in the Premier League in 3 years, you know, and it's about getting a team and a manager that's streetwise. And I just think that for all his experience, for all his knowledge about it, he's just not been given a chance. So the short answer to your question is definitely, you know, I feel for him, but it's definitely time for a change.
Yeah, and I think we saw since he's come back, when he joined, and there was a whole thing of with COVID, no fans being in and everything being saying how much we need the fans in there and how much of a boost they give to the players and the managers. Because I remember going to one of the Boxing Day matches under Sabri, and it was amazing there, everyone chanting his name and brilliant atmosphere. And you look back at the recent matches, Chris Hughton's first few games back at the City Ground, the abuse he's been getting from the fans, and obviously the chanting of Lamucci's name that's come out, you're being sacked in the morning by our own fans away. It's really not very fair on him. Adam, what were your thoughts when you saw or heard about these chants coming towards him? Because it's just not really very fair.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously I sit in the lower Trent, and obviously they were emanating from other parts of the ground. It's not something that, you know, I personally joined in with, especially the Sabri chants. I mean, you know, we've all seen different times with Forest and that. I mean, for me, Sabri is one of my favourite Forest managers that I've seen, especially since I've had a season ticket. I mean, my first year was under Billy Davis and he was brilliant. And then Sabri was the first manager since then where, you know, maybe a cranker, but, you know, but he's gone and he's not at the club anymore. And I think ultimately it's disrespectful to Chris Hughton to, you know, be chanting for ex-managers and things like that. Like, you're always going to get the boos at half time, full time, especially if we're not winning or we lose. You know, you're always going to get, you know, you're getting sacked in the morning from away fans, not usually from the home fans. I mean, when we're playing at the City Ground, it's not. We've got a fantastic fan base. I mean, I saw something from this past weekend where we had the second highest home attendance in the Championship, and we're bottom of the league at 1 point. You know, ultimately the fans are there, and we can generate a great atmosphere. And, you know, a lot of players come to the club, even if we don't play to Forest or play at the City Ground, and go, you know what, it's a great atmosphere. And, you know, but it needs to be a bit more positive. It's a toxic environment at the moment. I think it'd be unfair to say it's anything else. I mean, I've been to every home game this season, and I only missed Stoke away. And every game I've been to this season, it's just been so toxic. It's just been such a, you know, a volatile atmosphere. I mean, even when we was 1-0 up at half time against Cardiff, I mean, I've gone down at half time and people are, you know, you didn't hear many positive words. I mean, most people were saying, oh, we'll get beat 2-1. And, you know, it's almost an acceptance that we're going to get beat. And I think that goes to the players too. I mean, the players feel that, you know, players shouldn't have to have the crowd behind them to play good football, but they do it. That's that 12th man, the extra encouragement. And I think we need to try and back the manager as much as we can, as frustrating as it's been recently. And when I say back the manager, what I simply mean by that is just not getting on his back and not chanting for him to be sacked tomorrow. you don't have to like that he's still here. You might want another manager in, but it's a negative environment and it's not going to produce positive results on the pitch. Not to say it's the fans' fault, obviously, but I think, you know, if we could be that 12th man and just get behind him, especially when we're 1-0 up against Cardiff, then, you know, hopefully in the future it will bring positive results. But it's tough. It's tough to be a Forest fan, and it's probably tough to be a Forest player ultimately at this point in time.
Yeah, definitely. And Des, you said there before that you want a new manager at the club. Who would be your ideal replacement? Because at the moment we've seen a few interesting stories come out. Obviously, a number of weeks ago, there was the story about Chris Wilder coming out, which was totally ridiculous. And Dan Taylor said it on the NFFC pod about being his agent, basically working the journalist. I think it was Alan Nixon. And in recent days, obviously, John Terry, who did come out with a statement today and basically dissing himself and not being respectful to Chris Hughton. But who is your personal favorite? Is it an experience, or is it someone we don't really know, that like the Valerian Ismail at Barnsley?
I'm quite controversial with this, and I hate myself for saying it, but for me, we've got to go for the bolshy, abrupt type manager. And as much as I've hated him over the years and hated the thought of him managing Forest, you know, tomorrow's opponent, Neil Warnock, you know, because again, I spoke about being streetwise, and there's managers that are streetwise. There's the Gary Rowerts, there's Gary Monk, you know, who can do a job around the Championship, and when they get the right club, it clicks for them. But I think Warnock brings this sort of a bit of aggression. You know, Forest are a bit too easy at the moment to be pushed around and pushed over. You know, not just on the pitch, it feels. It just feels like as a club, people can say what they want, people can do what they want. And again, a bit like the siege mentality I spoke about under Billy Davis. I just think Warnock would be the type of manager who would get the best out of a Lyle Taylor and a Lewis Grabban. You know, he'd go back to the absolute basics. All that said, I don't think they'll go for Warnock because he's got too much to say. And that I feel is where they'll sit in terms of the manager. You know, I'm not a big Chris Wilder fan, but again, if I'm thinking along those lines, it's probably the same kind of thing. You know, he'll come in with his own ideas. He makes it so the world is against us. You know, we become the underdog and then we come out fighting. So those type of managers, you know, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because like when Lamucci come in, you know, who knew him really? You know, and he did a good job. There might be a manager out there that the club know of. You know, I think sometimes, you know, when the going gets tough, could we do worse than Andy Reid and Chris Cohen, that kind of thing? Do you know, it's just a shout. I don't think it's the situation for them right now in this real mess. But, you know, again, just to get the club and the fans and everybody sort of going again, you know, really sort of behind them, I can assure you, if that was the management pair in the next home game after tomorrow, the Millwall game, then there'll be another 5,000 in, and they'll be singing Reid in, they'll be singing Chris Cohen. So again, I just feel we need something that's going to sort of spur the club on. I was really disappointed when Martin O'Neill didn't work, because I kind of wanted that to be, you know, Karanka was good, but he was a bit flat, you know, and I think there was this love-hate relationship with the board and with everybody within the club. So I just think we need somebody to really sort of grab the club. I've always thought Warnock fancies the job. People tell me he wouldn't leave Middlesbrough. Well, he leaves clubs sort of when he feels like it, you know, and again, I'm a bit older than you guys, but remember when he was manager of Notts County, he absolutely adored Brian Clough, and I think he wants to ultimately one day follow in his footsteps. He has refused it in the past when Fawaz wouldn't give him what he wanted, you know, but we need somebody to go in and take the team, the club a little bit by the horns and just change that losing mentality. We need a winner. We need a real winner, a fighter and a winner, and I think whoever we get, you know, people who was upset with John Terry and the idea, you know, again, he's not a very likeable chap in general, but he's a winner. You know, he's a fighter, he's a winner. And I wasn't dead against it. I wouldn't be particularly happy. But we need that kind of thing. And you look at someone like that, and maybe he brings in like Rooney has, like Lampard has in the past at Derby. They bring in sort of good, solid youngsters from Chelsea or Aston Villa or clubs like that. They've got them links. I just think at the moment, with the manager we've got, the club's just sort of flat, not really going anywhere until we get somebody with a bit of fight and a bit of sort of up and at 'em mentality. For me, Warnock, we won't go very far wrong.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting you mentioned there about Reedy and obviously having Cohen with him. I think the video came out the other week, maybe last week at some point, when they did the interview with Andy Reid to talk about the academy and how it's going for them. And from listening to everything that he'd been saying about what they've been doing with the team, I think a lot of people said, well, this is what we need for the first team and this is how we want them to be playing. And it shows the disconnect between that academy style and then the first team. And following what the academy have done with Reedy, and obviously I think it's Dave Rogers, his assistant, they seem to be doing brilliant things. But I think, as you said there, it wouldn't be fair to give him the job right now based on the situation. Adam, what are your thoughts potentially on a replacement? Obviously, we've got Dane Murphy, who went for these unknowns at Barnsley. Do you think that's what he would do again for us?
Yeah, I mean, personally for me, and it's all a matter of opinion, I suppose, isn't it? But for me, if you've brought Dane Murphy in, that's your intent to say this is how we want to run the football club going forward. That model isn't going to be bringing in, I don't think you'll bring in Wilder or Warnock or Pulis or managers like this. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen. It's not. I wouldn't say that Chris Hughton's a Dane Murphy style manager based on what we know from Barnsley. For me, I trust him ultimately, and I know it's a lot to trust one person and to make that decision, but that's his job and that's what he did at Barnsley. And we can only go on the evidence that we saw at Barnsley when, before Ishmael, they had managers that came in and were successful. Managers of that same sort of style. I was listening to something not long ago, I can't remember who it was from, but it was essentially saying that Dane Murphy has worked for previous regimes where they bring in players to suit the style of football that they want to play, irregardless of who the manager is, and the manager fits around that. So it goes from the top all the way down to the management team, and Chris Hughton won't do that. And ultimately, I think you've got to bring in somebody that's got younger and got a point to prove. And if he wants to pick out a gem from Austria or Germany or wherever it might be to bring in a manager that can come and help us out, and that's fine. It's a long-term plan. I'd rather us personally go for somebody who is going to be here for 2 or 3 years and on a long-term plan, keep us up this season, mid-table next season, fight for the top 6 the season after. I know that's wishful thinking, especially with this board, and it can't be said that we give managers much time. But if we have a long-term vision and a long-term plan like that will help us more. I mean, you think about teams that have been promoted from the Championship recently, they're promoted by managers like Thomas Frank and Daniel Farke, who ultimately have come in. And yeah, obviously they've got good squads, they've got good players, but that's been built over time. Their models, their processes. It takes time to do this. So I'd be going on, the younger, maybe a bit more improving scale. I mean, I watched the under 23s and really plays some brilliant football. We do play quick attacking football, but I think that he's doing a great job there. And I think that he's happy with the job he's doing there. The last thing I'd want is him to come and take the first team job and it not work, or, was not given the time, because he's such a great asset to the club that I think he's better off staying where he is for now. But going forward, yeah, I trust Dane Murphy, and whoever Dane Murphy brings in, I think it's probably the right man.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of this Nottingham Forest special on the Final Whistle podcast. To listen to our views on the Marinakis ownership, Dane Murphy, the transfer window and much more, make sure to check out part 2 on our YouTube channel now. Thank you.